This is Arctic's new Freezer 36S air cooler. It's an excellent budget-friendly cooler, but I do have one reservation about it, and I will tell you all about this cooler in this video. Welcome to Machines and More. On this channel, I cover a variety of tech topics and PC building content. And if you enjoy content like this, please make sure you are subbed with that bell for notifications, and make sure you give this video a like here. Big thanks. And before we begin, I did want to let you know Arctic did provide this cooler for the purpose of evaluation here, but I'm not paid by Arctic for this review. I'm not paid to tell you anything. They don't have control over the content here, and you can always expect well-researched and independent feedback from this channel. Arctic's new Freezer 36S is a budget-friendly air cooler. The lowest end model is going to start at $28, and you can move up the stack. It's really only maxes out at $35 if you get the white version with the RGB. The one I have here is the black with RGB, and I will have all the SKUs and prices listed down below. It's a simple 4 heat pipe heatsink cooler. These are 4 dual loop heat pipes that it comes featured with. They are direct contact though, and that means the bottom of the base plate, there's no nickel plating over it. The heat pipes are just ground down flat, and they'll just touch the CPU's IHS directly. One thing you might notice is that the base plate is kind of small. The footprint is actually smaller than your AM4 IHS. It's even smaller than your AM5 IHS, and is definitely going to be smaller than the current Intel Gen, the LGA 1700 and LGA 1851 IHSs, because the IHS there is rectangular, and this doesn't come anywhere close to covering it. So you will see material exposed at the sides or top bottom of those CPUs, and then you might like it and be like, that looks kind of sketchy. Because you are covering the hotspot with this cold plate, it's going to be okay. And from my testing, I didn't see any issues there. The cooler utilizes Arctic's P12 Pro fan. That's Arctic's performance fan, and it does have a big RPM range, and that's where you might want to be cautious, and I'll touch on that after we discuss the performance, because you'll see that and you'll be like, yeah, I don't need to run this that fast, but you do have to make that adjustment. It is a pretty simple heatsink. I remember they had an earlier version of their freezer coolers, and it was like so sharp that you could use it it has serrated edge almost, that you could use it as a saw. At least that's what it looked like. And this is completely different. They've made it so that the heat clip, the fan clips are different style. Instead of going into the fan and then wrapping into the heatsink, they actually go into the heatsink and then they wrap into the fan. And that's what these 2 holes at the top and the bottom, and also on the underside of the cooler, that's what they're for. Because of that, you can only put the fan on one side of the cooler. So if you want to put this fan, relocate it to the other side of this heatsink, you have to turn it 180 degrees. And that's what I had to do here, because this fan by default would have sat on the RAM side, and I wanted it to be closer to the intake side. And that's why you have the Arctic logo upside down. So that is, it is what it is. I think it would have been reasonable to make it bidirectional, just by popping 4 additional holes. Now, more concerning to me though was how the fan mounted up to the heatsink, though, the ease of it, because it's not easy. When you practice it a few times, but that's probably the best advice that I can give you, is practice it before you build it into the case, because you do need to install the heatsink without the fan attached, and then after that, then you'll have to wrap the fan clips over the fan. And it's not easy to do that, especially when there's stuff, obstructions in and around the case on the motherboard. I was not immediately successful. It did slip out, and they did seem to have a tendency to slip out of the heatsink. And when it does, it scratched the heatsink, but it's kind of annoying to have to pop it back in. But on the other side, if it slips out of the hole, which it did for me, it is really difficult to get back in unless you take the entire heatsink off and just start over, and that could be a little bit annoying. So for new builders, and I do have to put on my new builder hat when I think about things like this, because oftentimes new builders are the ones that are looking at a simpler setup like that. this might be daunting. I just feel like that could result in some frustration just of how tedious that process is. The heatsink does come in at 156 millimeters tall, and that fits perfectly in a smaller case like the NR200. There are some compatibility compromises that may be possible with smaller boards like this mini-itx board here, which has some bigger M.2 heatsink and then some bigger top heatsinks. On my mini-itx board, there were definitely some areas that were way too close to the components. In a bigger board, I don't anticipate you'll have too many issues, but it's still going to be difficult to wrap the fan clips around the fan. For socket compatibility, the cooler is only compatible for the most recent Intel sockets, so 1851 and LGA 1700. Plus AM4 and AM5, and AM4 and AM5 will use these mounting brackets. They're actually plastic, kind of interesting, but this is straightforward. This will just screw into the stock backplate on your motherboard. For Intel, though, it uses a mounting frame. It'll replace your integrated retention mechanism, or ILM. And that may be daunting for some that are newer to this to install. So it's not terribly complicated. You do want to leave the CPU in place while you take off the hardware, and make sure you unlatch it first, because otherwise you'll get a nasty surprise when it kind of detensions. But anytime you're tinkering with your stock motherboard hardware, I always want to caution you, if you're new to this, then just be careful. The contact frame does improve the mounting pressure, does even things out a bit, and it's something that they feature on their AIOs as well. So it is nice that they're doing this, even though it's a lower cost item. And even if you just wanted to get a contact frame, that could run north of $10. So if you were just going for that, and then hey, you get a cooler too with that, so that's not too bad. And so you do get a tool to remove the ILM, and you do get the new screws that you need, but also MX7. This is Arctic's new kid on the block when it comes to thermal paste, and it works very well. I've used it in some of my higher end builds as well. So for the performance testing, I am testing in the NR200. As mentioned, the 156 millimeter height of this cooler makes it good fit for this case. The case panel did close without any incident, so that's what we want to look for. And I compared to the Hyper 212 Black Edition that I like to recommend for simple budget tower coolers in this case. So the Hyper 212 usually comes in around $30, and this one is in the same league, so they're a good comparison. Previous Freezer 36 that I tested wasn't optimal for LGA 1851. The contact frame that came with my launch version didn't even actually physically clear my 245K. Arctic's internal testing indicates a fairly large gap with a 285K, but I couldn't validate that because of my contact frame issue. The Freezer 36 has a very elegant fan mounting system, and I would have preferred that here, where this is the Freezer 36 method was excellent. The 36S is actually the opposite. It's not so great. And I'm really not sure why they didn't implement that, because it seemed like it could still get cross compatibility with different 120 millimeter fans. So for my noise normalized testing, there was a decent gap between the Freezer 36S and the Hybrid Noon 2 Black. And the Freezer 36S definitely outperformed it for the noise normalized intervals. Starting with the lower one here, and then moving on up to the 2300/2400 interval. It's about 5.4 decibels over the noise floor. If you are considering this cooler, definitely you'll want to adjust your fan curves, because if you're pairing with the appropriate CPU, there's no reason for you to regularly have this go into the 3000 RPM. But if you look at these results, a lot of motherboard, the stock fan curves are going to max out at, say, 75 degrees, in which case you're going to be getting really close to 100% fan speeds or 3000 RPM. Is it worth it to chase a few degrees here? I'd say definitely not. I mean, we're talking about a 5 decibel gap from the high interval already, and that's max speed for the Hyper 212, and then 8 decibels versus the moderately high interval, which I think that should be fine for most if you paired the CPU well with the cooler. And so adding that much noise, only getting that tiny little bit of performance increment, I'd say absolutely not worth it. But, you know, because of the way that stock motherboard fan curves are set up, you might see, you know, without adjusting those, you might see the system just ramp it up to 3000 RPM. And like, I don't really need it that cool. Just give me 2300 RPM max, and then I'll take the degree and a half penalty. That's completely reasonable. You do have to make that change in your fan curves for that to happen. So just be aware of that. Between these two coolers, I'd say definitely the Freezer 36S has an advantage thermally. Is, you know, are those 2 degrees, the small gap, is that worth the more difficult installation? That's where I think you'd have to make the call, because personally, I don't think it's worth it, because at this level of cooler for budget coolers, you know, sometimes targeting newer builders or CPUs where, you know, there are lower package power draw to begin with, I want to prioritize ease of installation. I want to prioritize the user experience, right? If you're spending a lot of time and you're scratching up your cooler, because, you know, I kind of scratched it up here when this popped out, which is not a big deal. But if that ends up happening to you, that you won't even notice the temps, right? This will be so frustrating. And I think for the standard heat clips and the installation experience with something like the Hyper 2 and 2, you may be better off with that versus chasing that small temp difference with this cooler. And I would say if you are chasing the 2-ish degrees, what are you doing here, man? Right? This is not, you can go to liquid cooling, you can go with a bigger dual tower. This is not what this is meant for, right? So yes, in theory it is better, but I think I do have reservations because of that installation process. So in summary, this is an excellent cooler thermally speaking. But when I put on my new builder hat, I do have some reservations about, you know, how would this be easy enough for someone that doesn't have too much experience building PCs to access. So I will be leaving links down below for this cooler. Make sure you give a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it as well. And big thanks for watching.